Johnson Chukwu, the Chief Executive Officer at Cowry Asset Management, one of our regular guests, really, a regular policy person. Mr. Chukwu, welcome again to the program.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm good.
We've been speaking on Skype from the US, from London and all that. So welcome back to the country. You went for summer holidays, isn't it? But it's good.
I was physically out of this place, but my spirit was here.
Yeah. No, it's good sometimes. All work and no play, they say, makes Jack a dull boy. Yeah. Isn't it? We should try as much as possible to balance work.
Absolutely.
And play. We don't even have the tradition of travel in Nigeria in terms of, you know, like taking off, taking leave, and all of that. And I'm also talking to myself.
Okay. I'm happy that you're referring to yourself as well.
All right, Mr. Chukwu, welcome to the show. Where do we start from? You know, I said at the beginning of the program that we'll have quite a lot to discuss, topical economic issues today. Let's start with the breaking news, GDP figures. Nigeria's GDP dropped to 1.94% in the second quarter of this year. The second quarter should be from April to June. April to June quarter. What do you have to say about it?
Interestingly, last night a journalist called me and said I should predict the outcome of the GDP. And I told her that I expect the GDP to decline. She said, why? I said, well, based on my own analysis, I do not think that the level of economic activities in the second quarter was higher than that of the first quarter. And she said I should predict the figure. I told her that it's going to be something in the region of 1.9 and 1.95%. And it came out at 1.94% print. So it wasn't surprising. The reality is that if you go to the streets, which I'm happy that your program does once in a while, and you feel the pulse of the people, you could actually see that there is a slowdown in economic activities. If you look at the consumption pattern, for instance, and you look at the demand for consumer goods, you also see a significant decline in consumption. In terms of productive activities, you saw a significant decline in productive activities. If you look at the GDP figures, for instance, apart from oil and gas sector that grew by 5.15% in the second quarter of this year, most other sectors, the non-oil sector actually declined. Non-oil sector grew by about 1.64%, lower than the figure you had in the first quarter of this year. If you look at the major contributors of the non-oil sector, you look at the agricultural sector, it grew by only about 1.79%. So the reality is that the sectors that actually drive the economy actually slowed down in the second quarter of this year. So it wasn't surprising, if not for the growth we saw in the agricultural sector. As a result of improvement in crude production, we saw a crude production that averaged about 1.98% million barrels, though there was slight decline from 1.99% based on the revised Q1 figures. If not for that performance of the crude sector, we also saw crude price remain quite high in the second quarter. Although the third quarter may not have the same favorable report. So we may not even have seen a growth of up to 1.94%, because if the non-oil sector contracted, grew by only 1.64%, the growth we saw in the second quarter was largely driven by the oil and gas sector.
Now the question is, when we're having this drop in GDP numbers from 2.01% in the first quarter,
it's actually revised to 2.1%.
Yes, revised to 2.1%. What are the underlying, challenges? Why did this GDP drop?
That's why.
Really, do you understand in terms of?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I had to refer to the two broad segments of the economy, which is the oil and gas sector and the oil and gas sector. In the first place, the oil and gas sector, there is no benefication of the oil and gas sector. So you are not seeing the impact of the growth in oil and gas sector other than you see an improvement in foreign exchange earnings. But in terms of pervasive impact on the economy, in terms of job creation, it's not there, because the oil and gas sector is not really trapped in terms of the value chain in the country. The sector that will impact positively on the level of job creation, the level of consumer spending, the level of economic activity is the non-oil sector. And we saw a slowdown in that sector. What does that tell us? It simply tells us that some of the policies that the government has enunciated or trying to drive, used to drive the economy, are not as effective as they're intended to be. Take, for instance, the agricultural sector. There's been a lot of focus on agricultural sector. And for that agricultural sector to only grow by about 1.79%, for me, it was actually worrisome, because it then means that the impact of the several funding initiatives targeted at the agricultural sector are not having as much impact as they expected to have. So for that reason, you're not seeing the expansion in terms of economic well-being. You're not seeing the expansion in terms of job creation that are intended by some of these policies.
Now, you know, you're raising a lot of salient issues, and I don't know if we'll have time for all of that today. You did mention the agricultural sector. So much attention has been into that sector in the last few years. In fact, I would even say since the governor of the central, no, is this since Sanusi's time, really? Because the CBN also created NISA, as it were, in terms of, you know, undertaking some of the risk lending associated with the agricultural sector. So if we see from that time till now, we are not seeing that robust growth in agriculture that should even make us food sufficient, for example. The borders are closed right now. From the announcement of the president, I discussed that yesterday, and you see that there are a lot of smuggling that comes in, food products and all of that. Does that mean that the policy is not working? One, or can we also look at it this way, that all problems are not money? Do you understand what I mean? Because we've been throwing monies at issues.
Okay, let me tell you the approach I have in addressing some of these issues. That for you to solve a problem, you have to look at the systemic structure of that problem. You have to look at addressing problems holistically. You can't address a problem from the symptoms. The slow growth of the economy is interrelated to a lot of factors we have to address holistically. If you look at the agriculture that we're referring to, we still have a lot of wastages in terms of agricultural production. We have a lot of products, particularly perishable goods, that do not get to the market and therefore are not counted. Take, for instance, tomato and the number of these products. We still don't have storage facilities that are effective. We don't have evacuation facilities in terms of transport infrastructure that are effective. You can't have storage facilities if you don't have stable power supply. You can't have evacuation facilities if you don't have efficient road transport infrastructure and rail transport infrastructure. These are some of the factors that are militating against agricultural production.
But are those, yes, sorry, Mr. Chukwu, just to also put this in. What you're saying now, aren't they long-term measures? Because, you know, government is trying to fix Lagos-Ibadan, some part of Lagos-Ibadan right now. Do you understand what I'm saying? The power sector will not be fixed in the next 3-6 months or even 1 year.
Okay.
You get what I mean?
You know, when we talk of long term and short term, it's good to put those things in perspective. Every time will become a long time after some time, and every time will be short time at some point. It's very simple thing. The key thing, and when I talk of strategic intent and strategic purpose, is that you look at, okay, I want to make, for instance, North Central the agricultural base of the country. So what do I need to do? You say, okay, I'm going to do a rail network that will run from Port Harcourt to North Central, standard gauge rail, and I also do another rail that will run from North Central to the Southwest. So you can say, okay, how long will it take me? 10 years. That is a long time, is that not so? Between 1999 and now, it's 20 years gone. So in 1999, you could say 2019 is long term, but then you should have started planning and building those infrastructure. There is difference between us and some of the ways that the Western countries have adopted in doing a lot of things. That they will actually say, look, we have a plan to build this infrastructure in 20 years' time because our population will grow to this point. Okay, we need this level of infrastructure to support that population. 20 years. That 20 years will be long time at the point we are making that projection or that plan, but in time to come, it will become short term. So the key thing is, what are our strategic plans as a country? If you want to make agriculture the bastion of this economy, we need to look at those interlinking infrastructure that will support agriculture. It doesn't matter that it was not done last year. the logic of, I mean, there's a saying that the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The next best time is today. Because if you plant it today, in 5 years' time, it will grow. The option of not doing things because we think it's long term is the bane of our development. Nancy, look at what happened when the Europeans came to this country and they discovered coal in Enugu. They immediately started building a rail line to run from Port Harcourt to Enugu.
And infrastructure around them.
Thank you. So eventually the purpose was to evacuate coal from Enugu to Port Harcourt and ship to their country. What have we done in relation to that? At some point, when we are still developing, because some of the challenges we have that, when I look at it in my poem, I said, it can actually be described as what you may call arrested development. At some point, we were developing. When we started refining petrol in Port Harcourt, we felt that it was necessary to also refine petrol in Northwest, to what is now called Northwest, so that it be easy to distribute from the Northwest to the other
parts of the North.
Yes. And then we built a pipeline that took crude from Port Harcourt to Kaduna and built a refinery there. We also built a refined product pipeline to run from Port Harcourt to Calabar. So you can actually backfeed. So in case Port Harcourt refinery was down, you could actually backfeed the southwest, the southeast, or the southern part of the country, from refined products in the northern part of the country. That was when we were thinking. So what has happened? Those are the challenges we have. So you really can have a very robust agricultural sector if you do not build the interlinkages that are necessary to support effective and productive agriculture in the country. Look at the irrigation system. What have we done in terms of irrigation in the past 20 years? These are necessary to have two seasonal farming as we should have. Places like Kebbi is producing a lot of rice. We're only producing upland rice in Kebbi. A place like Abakaliki can actually is producing paddy rice. So, but some of these locations like Abakaliki or some southeastern part of the country can actually produce two-season rice. So you can actually have paddy rice during the rainy season and upland rice during the dry season, if only you can irrigate these farmlands. What are we doing about that? So the key thing is that if we don't build the necessary infrastructure, funding alone may not be sufficient. It's necessary but not sufficient for you to have a robust agricultural sector.
You know, with what you're saying right now, my head is really opening up in terms of, and I've always said it anyway, it doesn't only even affect the agricultural sector, because if you take a look at the manufacturers will also tell you they have their own issues. Ordinary business people will tell you they have their own issues. Small business people. So there is a need for a fundamental strategic thinking in the country. And perhaps that brings me to leadership, but that's not, let's discuss that later. You know, I wrote down here all sector in Q3. What it will look like, and I would want you to just talk about it in a few seconds, because we have quite a pile of a lot of things we'll talk about. The price of crude, Brent crude, in the last 2 months have been down in terms of has not traded at around 65, 69, 70 US dollars. You mentioned the second quarter we saw Brent crude upside, and in the last 2 months or so, I know I've been hammering it here on my show when I do market analysis. There was a time that Brent even fell to 56, went to 58. As I yesterday, it was 59 US dollars. How would this, what will happen to us really?
You're going to see a further shortfall in government revenue because good thing is that our production is quite strong. There's not been major disruptions. The few disruptions are being managed. Of course, there are still disruptions of crude production, but not of the same magnitude as we had in 2016 or 2017. But the challenge will be in terms of price. If you look at the 2019 budget, it's predicated on $60 per barrel. Today, it doesn't look like the trade dispute between China and the US that is actually impacting negatively on commodity prices is likely going to be resolved soon. You saw the new tariffs took effect on Sunday. Both countries are imposing tariffs on each other's goods. So I think we're going to see an oil sector that will retain largely its current production volumes, well as the challenge will be in terms of the crude price. So the negative variance we're going to see in the crude price will not necessarily be offset by the positive variance we will see in crude production. In fact, we're not even going to see a positive variance in crude production. Granted that crude production is in the region of 1.98 million barrels. Remember, our crude production target is 2.3 million barrels. So we're not even going to achieve that crude production target. The challenge you have, Nancy, is that if you look at our fiscal plan, it is not based on realistic assumptions. So I hope when we're preparing the 2020 budget, the budget estimates will be more realistic, so that the government will recognize that it does not have the economic resources to continue to incur the current level or the current expenditure. Because the illusion you have when you do a budget that is based on over-optimistic revenue projections, the likelihood that you will also prepare an expenditure budget will be higher than your revenue is quite high. Look at the figures from budget IT. 2018 gross federal government revenue was 3.86 trillion naira. 2018 recurrent expenditure of the federal government was 5.85 trillion naira. That was a shortfall of 2 trillion naira between the federal government revenue and federal government recurrent expenditure. 2 trillion naira. We're not talking of the capital expenditure. So the government said they incurred the capital expenditure of 1.65 trillion naira. So if you add that, it then meant that the government deficit, federal government deficit, was 3.865 trillion naira. The government has shown us how it borrowed 1.74 trillion. What are the 1.9 trillion? Reality is that with such, and this is repetitive, if you look at 2017 budget actuals, it was the same thing. 2016 was the same thing, pattern. So you are seeing a situation whereby, but unknown, because the government had budgeted about 7.1 trillion revenue. So that informed some of the decisions, including the increase in minimum wage. So by the time you bring in the increase in minimum wage, the figures are going to look very obtuse.
And the government is not, we've not, though the president has said, okay, we're going to pay minimum wage, but we've not even seen anything yet. I don't know if the government is backtracking now. The government has now realized that we do not have the financial capacity to do that. And I'm wondering how Labour would also take it. Because those were issues that we debated at that time and were brought out.
You see, that's one of the things that, by the time we come with a realistic budget, the government will now have to recalibrate our fiscal plan. Reality, Nancy, between you and I, we need to go back to ground zero and look at what kind of fiscal structure do we have. If you look at the current structure, is not sustainable. Something we give in sooner than later.
Something must give.
It's very simple thing. The government debt service from that budget IT report is 2 trillion naira.
Yes, for servicing of debt.
For servicing of debt. Yes. So, if you earned 3.86 trillion naira and you used 2 trillion naira
to service
debt, and then your total recurrent expenditure, including debt service, was 5.85 trillion naira. So it simply means you are borrowing to pay salaries, you are borrowing to run the government activities, operational activities, and then every kobo that you put in infrastructure is borrowed.
Because for every one naira that would
if the government was to be a corporate organization, it would have gone bankrupt. But because it's government, it will take a longer time to go bankrupt. But it will certainly go bankrupt.
Like Greece's.
If we continue in the same direction.
Can we go the way of Greece?
It's going to be a different outcome, in the sense that Greece has submitted to a single currency. For which he had no control of printing. Ours will be a different outcome. How our own will unravel.
Perhaps the solution will be the Zimbabwe style, print more money. you know, I said if we start talking now, so many issues will start coming out, But I think you've sent the message, and it's for us to be really holistic and realistic with some of the things that we're doing. There's no need to be political about it, and there's no need to, you know, paint it or cosmetics, just like the makeup I'm wearing now. Just paint it, look nice. But when you go, you wash it off, you go back to basics, isn't it?
Like Bobrisky. After paid, he becomes a woman.
I don't want to go to that point. All right, let's talk about the next one, the $9.6 billion fine. I know I spoke with you on it that day the issue broke, and we gave a background. 2010 transaction gone bad. In fact, the Jonathan administration negotiated about $850 million in settlement. This administration came in, did not really look at it that way. The company took the country to court. You know, it's so much maxed in. Can you just give some kind of assessment? From that time we discussed, I think the story broke like 2 weeks ago, till now.
You know, Nnaji, when we discussed, I said one of the things that, one of the banes of governance in the country is that those in public service, those in government feel a sense of infallibility, and that they believe that nothing can touch them. And because they believe nothing can touch them, they take for granted contractual obligations and commitments. And we look as if, as a people, we don't take things seriously. We're not diligent. That's the only way you can see these issues coming up. And I'm going to bring two things together. One, the allegation by P&ID is that they approached the government was not serious in the arbitration process. That's the allegation they made. And that when the government was not serious in keeping to the terms of the contractual commitment, and when they went to try to resolve it, they approached several people in government, and they were not making headways. And that our government was, even the period of arbitration, were not very serious. And the offers we made to negotiate were also not serious. Because obviously those who were negotiating the part of government felt that being government, being this elephant, nobody can touch us. But unfortunately, the chicken has come home to roost, and it's going to affect all of us if we don't find a way to resolve it. And I said I'll bring two things into it. Look at the issue of the increase of what the U.S. Embassy, Home Office called
the visa.
Yeah, they called it
reciprocity fee.
Yes. It's very simple. I follow them on Twitter, and before they came out, they sent out Twitter messages. And they said in the Twitter message that they engaged the Nigerian government for 18 months, trying to convince the Nigerian government to bring down the visa fee on Americans coming to visit Nigeria to the same level that they were charging Nigerians. That did not make any headway. And then immediately they imposed the reciprocity fee 2 days after we brought our visa fee. Is it not mockery of ourselves as a people?
Reduced it.
So even the knee-jerk response of reducing it 2 days after they imposed that, and then we're in the media saying that we have reduced the visa fee chargeable on Americans. See, I felt insulted.
So should the Americans now bring it down?
Good God.
They won't even answer us. I don't think they have.
18 months, and they made no headway, and they imposed the penalty on you, and all of a sudden we woke up. That's exactly what has happened in the case of P&ID. Well, everybody in the country is alive to it. But I'm sure people were engaged in negotiating this matter. And it was not even the public glare. It wasn't the public discussion. Nobody brought it up until the penalty became final. That's when we are running here like headless chicken. No. There's a problem with the way we manage ourselves as a people.
You know, this show, if we have 3 hours, we won't get out of here, because there are a lot of things coming out from our discussion, but I'll leave it to rest for another day, like what you said. Let's move over to another issue. The news also coming in this morning that Nigeria may face another $2.3 billion fine. I don't know if you've seen that.
Mambilla.
On the Mambilla, in arbitration in France. And I'm really wondering what exactly is happening. The company claimed that they had given them the gas processing deal, the contract, and they later gave it to a consortium of three Chinese.
The construction of the Mambilla hydropower plant.
Power plant. What does all this say? I think you've even summed it up with what you said. But what would the impact of this be? If you add $2.3 billion to $9.6 billion, that's like, it would about 55%. of the nation's budget.
You know,
60.
The good thing that has happened is that the $9.6 billion judgment against the country has actually woken all of us up. Otherwise, this case that they took to France for adjudication or trial may not have come to the public knowledge. I mean, the case of the Mambilla hydropower plant, where they said, look, the contract was given to them in 2003 or thereabouts. Yes. And that in 2018 or 17,
27, so vested interest in government.
Yes, now only awarded to 3 Chinese consortium to build. I don't know the terms of the contract they got with government, but like I said, there's a problem with a level of diligence. In the first place, there must be a default clause that the government cannot distribute into its contracts. If a contract was given out in 2003 and the Mambilla power plant was not built, who defaulted? Was it the government of Nigeria or the contractor? And if you have prepared a good commercial contract, there are default penalties on either side. And what you need to do as a government is to make sure you drive this in as an organization with some sense of responsibility. So if you have duties in a contract, make sure you abide by those duties to the contract. And the other parties have defaulted, call the contract and activate that default clause so that the other party will also be liable for the default. I don't know what happened in the case of the Mambilla hydropower plant. If the default is on the part of the government that made the contract, because I know that issue of Mambilla hydropower plant has been in the drawing board for so long. And if it was awarded to a company that had no capacity to build it, the government should have activated the default clause. Then if it was the government that did not meet some of the terms of the contract, the government should have, at the onset, tried to renegotiate the terms of the contract amicably. But if we just walk away on contract, which is what we do consistently at different levels of government. Nancy, because this is a national television, I'm not at liberty to tell you some of my personal experience with the government. There's a government in the country that is owing us a lot of money. We did every aspect of the contract, and they just woke up one day and walked away. Of course, we've gone to court.
And the court, you may not
also
have
the challenge you have is that if you have a dispute with a state government, you have to go to court within the states. And in that court, the government is likely going to have undue influence. And I can tell you from my experience, these are the situation in the country, which is also why P&ID had to go and get their judgment outside the country. If you go into a lot of contract that you enter into with foreign partners, they want the place of arbitration to be outside this country. Now so it puts a question mark on our legal system.
What does it say for foreign investors, those watching us? You know, because the Nigerian story has just been there. What does it say for foreign nationals coming? President, and I will want you to also tie it into TCAD 7 that just finished. The president was in Japan. He met with Japanese investors. In fact, he told Toyota to set up an assembly plant here in Nigeria, which is fantastic because if you take an average, most Nigerians even drive Toyota. I don't know why. They say fuel consumption and all of that. Perhaps it also makes sense for Toyota to come and have an assembly plant. What does it say from the foreign perspective side and what President Buhari went outside to do? So I just want you to tie it quickly.
I'll look at it from a systemic point of view, which is the first point is that we need to make our country investor friendly. We need to look at what's our ranking on ease of doing business and global competitiveness index. Those two are major factors that will drive investors to come to your country. There's a saying, I don't know how true it is, that the ruler of the Dubai Emirates used to say that if you build it, they will come.
Yes.
Yeah. What they did was they built the infrastructure. They also built a legal and regulatory framework that attracted not just investors, even shoppers.
I think the book he wrote, My Vision, people should go and read it.
Thank you. Yeah. So the key thing is that you need to be strategic. You need to be strategic in attracting investment. I've always said this. You can't go to cap in hand and tell an investor, come and build, set up in my country or in my territory if the environmental factors, the economic factors, the legal framework, the commercial framework are not attractive to that investor. Investors are highly rational. They're going to go to places where they will be exposed to minimal risk and enjoy possibly maximum return. So if you make your environment, if you de-risk your environment, then you can now enjoy the benefit of having a huge market. If you look at Nigeria's ranking on ease of doing business and global competitive index, our greatest ranking in global competitive is in terms of our size of our market. The next in terms of mobility and size of our labor. So the questions are, if we have this compelling pull to bring investors to the country, why are they not coming?
And AFTA would also change it. This African Continental Free Trade may likely change this size of the market that makes us so cocky and makes us so, you know, sometimes irresponsible to say, anyway, we are the largest market. AFTA market will be the largest because people will go to other countries that are making it work, minus 1 billion people minus the rest of us that are 200 million people. The rest of them will be the market. So I hope we know what we're talking about.
The issue is not even whether it's already working. Look at what Toyota is setting up an assembly plant in Ghana.
In Ghana.
What's the population
then
of
I
Ghana?
think Volkswagen has set up in Rwanda.
Okay, good. What's the population of Ghana? Ghanaian population is less than
20 million or so.
It's about 20 million.
20 million, yes.
So if Toyota is going to set up an assembly plant in Ghana where they will assemble Toyota and Suzuki, then you can easily infer that the target market is Nigerian market. And it is not likely if they set up a manufacturing outlet in Ghana, they will come and set up in Nigeria. Because they already looked at, for them, they have already come close to the market, target market,
yes,
with the supporting infrastructure. Yes. So you have the supporting infrastructure, the supporting commercial framework and legal framework.
So they assemble in Ghana and they ship to us.
The target market is just in the next
45 minutes by flight.
So that's it. If we don't, and I've said it repeatedly, if we don't put the house in order, we'll be the losers under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. But if we do the right things, we should be the market that will benefit most, the economy that benefit most from that African Continental Free Trade.
Now let's talk about putting our house in order too. The Senate has plans. In fact, they are on recess, but the hue and cry right now is the Senate is going to spend another 5.5 billion naira on itself in terms of buying cars. The spokesperson of the Senate, Adedayo Adeyeye, did say, why? In fact, civil society has taken them to court. I think Budget, which you spoke about, and some other civil society groups have taken the Senate to court. And the Senate is saying, at least from the mouth of the spokesperson, that is an event in futility, because why should you put eyes on us? The judiciary does the same, the executive does the same. And I and my team, we prepared data. I don't know if we have it. Let's put it on the screen. Let me quickly get it from here. In terms of how much has been budgeted to the National Assembly since 1999. In fact, 1999, it was at 2.2 billion naira. 2018, it's raised. It was, raised to about 139.5 billion naira. If we have that card, let's put it on the screen to see the gradual projection of how much the Senate gets. What do you have to say about this?
Okay.
Not also forgetting, let me put this, Saraki's Senate had 4 billion naira to buy the same cars.
Okay. You know, my background is more of a strategy. All I do on a daily basis is the issue of strategy. And I want to always take things from the strategic point of view. Nice, I want us to take our minds back to during the Obasanjo's era. There was something that happened, I think, between 2002 or 2003, something around that period. I may not be exactly correct on the timing. It was when the government introduced the monetization of benefits. Yes. What has happened to that monetization, Nancy? That's the question. At that point, before the monetization, there's a place called in Abuja here, Akpo Legislative Quarters, yes, where the National Assembly members were living in government properties, for which the government was maintaining those properties, paying security and everything. The government of Obasanjo said, look, this is not sustainable. We want to cut down on the current expenditure. We're going to monetize all the benefits due to government officials, including National Assembly members. Let me ask you, if we monetize the issue of vehicle to the National Assembly members, the likelihood that they will individually bring out from their pockets that amount to buy down those number of vehicles is very minimal. Little. So what has happened to that monetization policy? We have talked about the ballooning in the government recorded expenditure. In fact, if you compare 2017 and 2018 recorded expenditure, you saw a material increase in terms of recorded expenditure. And we're going to see further increments as we increase salaries, as we increase benefits. So the question is this, which is why I said, look, we need to recalibrate our fiscal plan. And if we do the right things, we will realize that current economic expenditure is not sustainable, including the amount that is being spent on the National Assembly, because I don't want us to look at it in isolation. The key thing is that we need to go back to that monetization policy. So that if a National Assembly member, for instance, a senator is entitled to 20 million naira for the car, by the time he gets that, it's no longer benefiting kind, because under the current personal income tax, all incomes are subject to tax. Tunde Fowler will hit him.
Yes, I will come to that.
Collect his tax. And I will not see how the man will go and use 100 million to go and buy 3 cars. So these things, are they paid to them in cash? If they are paid in cash, what level of tax are they paying?
So Fowler, let's come to Fowler's issue now. Talking about banks to charge VAT on online transactions from January 2020. That came in from Babatunde Fowler. What do you have to say about that? In fact, it brought a lot of you and cry to a colleague of mine said, Nancy, does that mean if I order amala online? You know, you have these food companies right now online. Would I now start paying for it? Okay,
my approach is very simple. We need to ask ourselves, where do we want to migrate our payment system to? Is it cash or electronic payment? If we want to migrate the electronic payment, we have to allow that sector to grow. Today, at some point when the economy was quite strong, you saw a lot of electronic payment platforms, a lot of online retail companies. Many of them have gone under.
Yes.
Today, the few that are there are struggling. But while as technology is moving the world towards electronic payment systems, it is for us as a country a cultural shift. And one of the things you do if you want to encourage a cultural shift is that you incentivize it. You do not extort.
Are you saying they shouldn't pay tax?
I believe it is too early.
But anything you do, you should pay tax.
You see, there's nothing wrong with anything you do, you pay tax.
Because the same people would also go abroad and pay taxes.
No, I'm coming.
Yeah.
For instance, the industry where I operate, the capital market, we got at some point
a rebate of 5 years, I think.
Yes, of waiver of VAT and taxes on secondary market transactions. Simply that you want to use. Remember what some of the things you use tax to do is to encourage or incentivize an industry you want to grow, or to discourage a particular behavior or consumption. You can impose taxes to discourage consumption. You can also take out taxes
to encourage,
or even subsidy, which is called negative tax, to encourage a particular behavior. So for me, the first thing is that we should encourage a migration from a cash-based economy to a cashless economy. When we do that, we are going to be able to track and trap all economic activities and measure economic activities and determine which ones to incentivize and which ones to discourage. I think it may be too early to begin to take taxes on that, what I may call a cultural shift that we want to encourage, because we may end up disincentivizing them.
Yes, I think you have a point there, and I think perhaps FIRS should be listening, they watch. Babatunde Fowler perhaps should be having a rethink. Though he said that it will come up in 2020, is 2020 also enough time for that to come
maybe he should look at deferring it for that. I don't have a problem with the long run, medium to long term charging, but I want us to migrate away from cash. And one of the benefits we enjoyed from migrating from cash so far, which nobody has actually come to trumpet, is that we are seeing fewer and fewer instances of armed robbers going to visit people's homes, because they no longer expect to get cash from you at home.
But they've taken another dimension. They follow you with your ATM there to the ATM
but there's also a high limit to what they can.
Okay, lastly, because we have 2 minutes to the end of the show. So, Mr. Chukwu, just in less than 2 minutes, talk to me about what is happening in South Africa. Just before I came in, there was a breaking news that the Nigerian government has summoned the South African High Commission for a meeting. Xenophobic attacks that seems not to abate. I remember this administration was it in 2015 or 2016? We had these issues. Okay, let's go after South African companies. I remember the former president of SA, South Africa, Jacob Zuma, come in. Immediately we announced that, yes, the MTN fine. Jacob Zuma landed in this country quickly, and the fine was brought down. How should we approach this? Because Nigerians Not just in South Africa, in Ghana, everywhere, they are crying.
Okay, you say you don't have time, so I'm going to try to make it very brief. In the first place, the government of South Africa has a responsibility to protect all citizens in their country, irrespective of whether they are Nigerians or Europeans or other Africans. That's one thing. It is, for me, it beggars logic that the South African government and the South African law enforcement agencies will be watching and seeing Nigerians and Nigerian properties being destroyed or being attacked. I want to believe that the government is very serious. The government wants to stop it, they can stop it. That's one thing. On our own side, we need to rebuild our economy. I remember, Mercy, when I was a young, a couple of years back, maybe 20, 30 years ago, Indonesians were attacking Chinese in Indonesia. They were attacking Chinese shops. They were looting Chinese shops. They were attacking, the kind of attacks we're having in South Africa was happening to Chinese in Indonesia. Today, China has grown to be a world power. Indonesia dare not.
Yes.
Indonesia dare not attack South Africans in Chinese in Indonesia. So, similarly, the respect you get as a country is based on the vibrancy of your economy.
Economic power.
That's the key thing. China was the largest populated country in the world. They were being ridiculed everywhere. Today, Chinese are being respected worldwide. We need to put our house in order.
House cleaning.
Yes. And then on a final note, we also need to be strategic in our engagement with any country in the world. We, as a young man in the University of Lagos, I witnessed Nigeria sponsor so many South Africans on scholarship in the University of Lagos. They were enjoying better life than we, Nigerians, because the government was paying them a lot of money, that some of them began to use that money to drink. There was no strategic intent. There was no strategic objective in our fight to liberate South Africa. If we did, we would have imposed on South African Constitution, the South African Independence Constitution, a provision that a Nigerian can come to South Africa without a visa.
Yes.
We could have gotten it at that point.
Now, they've even given Ghana, that the Ghanaian can come to South Africa without visa. Just as we close, let's take this comment. Daniel Musa Yarima on Twitter says, Nancy and Johnson Chukwu, okay, Nancy, from the key issues Johnson Chukwu is raising is a signal to the fiscal authorities that we need to get serious with the Nigerian economy. We need a more dynamic approach to reviving Nigeria's growth attitude as it concerns the economy. The break on Twitter says, the economy. Oladeji says, since you have been professing solutions, I beg no time, Jare. Oh, I understand the sentiment, because we've been talking about solutions that, at least for the time I've started, you know, this business program for many years, no solution. Mr. Chukwu, thank you very much for coming. I wish you a lovely day.
Thank you.
All right, we just have to go. We just have to go. But I hope that, you know, the government is listening to us and take out a lot of things that we've said. It's not about being political. There's no politicalness, so to speak, with Naira and Kobo. The yam in the market does not say PDP and APC. So we need to be strategic and holistic, like Johnson Chukwu has said.